This is Larry Rosenthal of the Goldman School with steps 7 and 8 of the Eightfold Path. Decide and tell your story. Some tips. First, we'll talk about the practical meaning of decide, step 7 of the Eightfold Path. And then we'll talk about what makes for winning storytelling on step 8. First, the practical meaning of decide. The Eightfold Path method of public policy analysis involves directed thinking. It's a systematic approach towards policy choice. But it's thinking dedicated towards a specific result, choosing the best alternative, and then moving forward to persuade others that it's the right choice. In practical terms, what this means is that finalizing the trade-off step and reaching a decision is imperative. Once you've done so and figured out which alternative prevails, you'll be able to build a strong case for it because you've confronted the trade-offs successfully. Confronting the trade-off, step 6 of the Eightfold Path, cannot go on forever. That would represent a state of indecision that the analyst must conquer by reaching a conclusion and moving forward towards advancing that recommendation with the client and in the world. So depending upon the problem and the alternatives and criteria that are under consideration, the recommendation may be obvious or it may be a very close call. Either way, confronting the trade-offs provides us a kind of dress rehearsal opportunity where we stage each of the alternatives' most persuasive case were it chosen as our recommendation. These stories, these cases that we would build for each of the candidate alternatives is in turn a candidate story that one would tell if that alternative is chosen. Decide means choosing which of these stories you wish to tell in the public interest or you feel compelled to tell, and then moving forward to deliver that recommendation persuasively to your client. Now let's turn towards what makes for winning storytelling on step 8 of the Eightfold Path. First, it makes sense to start with the simplest version. Bardak calls this the version of the story for Grandma Bessie. Imagine being able to advance the recommendation simply by explaining what we should do and why, and limiting yourself to only 1 minute to do so. Other names for this version are the taxi driver version or the elevator version, other circumstances where you'd want to be able to deliver the goods, tell the story persuasively, convince the listener that your recommendation is the right one in a very short time. Now, longer and more sophisticated versions of that story, in written and oral forms, should be gauged for specific audiences' needs. Imagine delivering the story to your client or to others. What do they need to know? What would best persuade them? Try and find a comfortable narrative flow and then concisely explain why your chosen recommendation is the best possible alternative. Always stay in persuasion mode as you make that case. Always reflect to others that you are convinced, and then communicate that state to others and convince them. Be careful not to qualify your statements or emphasize points of your thinking that you know to be weaknesses. Leave those points to your critics and prepare to respond to them. As you go, locate a very sound and comfortable balance between being very precise in the case that you make and covering your points comprehensively. You want to convince your audience that you've thought of everything, but you want to recognize that there will never be time to say everything. As always, you want to make your written and your oral presentations engaging, clear, and authoritative. Test the stories you tell to detect whether you yourself would be swayed by them. And never simply recite your eightfold path elements in order. That method, as Bardak explains, is for your thinking, not for your writing and your speaking. Storytelling involves making a clear and concise case, not walking the listener through each and every step of the Eightfold Path. Remember that less is often more. Try saying only what's absolutely necessary, and then be prepared to answer every question about your arguments, your findings, your evidence, your reasoning, which you can reasonably anticipate. Reviewing, we've looked at steps 7 and 8 of the Eightfold Path. Decide and tell your story. And we've had some tips. First on the practical meaning of decide, and then the elements that make for winning storytelling. And that concludes this mini lecture.